Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowles, and as always, I'm joined by Joe Mead. This week, we're going to combine recap and preview into one because only a few teams really had worthy games in week 3, and there's a ton of good ones in week 4. And then, as always, we'll end up with questions. So, Joe, we'll start with the only Big Ten game this week, and that was between Penn State and Illinois. You said this is a good barometer for Penn State. First away game against an Illinois team that might be sneaky, but they passed the test. Good performance from Drew Aller, and this ends up not being close.
Yeah, it kind of looked uneasy for Penn State in the beginning. Luckily, Illinois aided them with, it seemed like, a million turnovers. I believe the first quarter or the first part of the first half, it was three. Luke Altmaier looked really uneasy, and you got to give credit to Penn State's defense. They were all over their receivers. They didn't let Illinois establish any kind of run game. Every time Illinois had a sign of life, Penn State quickly shut it down. And off the turnovers, Penn State capitalized a lot. For Penn State, I would have liked to see them pull away a little more in the second half. It really wasn't decisive until the end of the third, beginning of the fourth. But, Penn State did what they had to. We'll get into this later about style points and how I think they're kind of garbage. For Penn State, a huge win. I think this is their first real test of the year, and they're going to have another one, which we'll talk about later on this episode. So, good on them. And Illinois definitely has a lot to work on still. Had a lot of chances to make this a game. I'm not going to say win the game, and I'm going to take it on the chin. I was wrong that this could be a very close game. Illinois certainly had opportunity, but left way too much out there, turned the ball over way too much. And the story of the game is turnovers and Illinois being unable to establish any kind of offensive rhythm. Luke Altmaier's got a lot to figure out. Their offensive line has a lot to figure out. And certainly, one thing I'll say is the Big Ten West champion last year, Purdue, also lost their first Big Ten game at home to Penn State. That doesn't mean they'll win the West, but definitely not the end of the line for Illinois, but certainly a long way to go.
So there are a whole lot of games against non-conference opponents. I'll run through them really quickly. I'm not sure we have to go beyond it. But Maryland took care of Virginia. Louisville beat Indiana. Wisconsin beat Georgia Southern. Minnesota lost at UNC. Northwestern lost at Duke. Western Michigan lost at Iowa. Rutgers handled Virginia Tech. Nebraska beat Northern Illinois. Michigan beat Bowling Green. Syracuse beat Purdue. One of these games I don't want to talk about, Joe, is Ohio State. They played Western Kentucky. We called on them to kind of show a little bit more strength offensively. They weren't putting up great numbers against some pretty inferior opponents, but here they have 42 points at halftime, including 5 touchdowns in the second quarter. They take care of business 63-10. So some good stuff from Ohio State here, and improved to 3-0, and certainly promising offensive performance from the Buckeyes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was one of the few people, I guess, not national media, but a lot of people, and Joel Klatt mentioned this today on his cast, that everyone loves to jump on Ohio State. And as a Michigan fan, I could definitely see how that is. If they beat a team by 53 like they did Western Kentucky, well, that's what they're supposed to do. But if they beat a team like Indiana only by a certain amount, everything's going wrong, and Ryan Day can't coach, and the offense is falling apart. The bottom line is Ryan Day has produced plenty of very good quarterbacks wherever he's been and improved any kind of offense. And it's only taken a week 3 for them to find their groove. And I think the story of this game, Sean, wasn't even the offense. The defense playing against a Western Kentucky team, traditionally one of the best non-Power 5 offenses, only giving up 10 points. And really, I think they practically could have shut them out if they wanted to. Maybe the intensity was there regardless. Great job on Jim Knowles. He was under a lot of scrutiny this offseason after the last 2 Ohio State games last year against Michigan and Georgia, but good on him. And yeah, important transition for the Buckeyes as they head into this huge week, which we'll probably get into very soon.
So the last game that we're going to talk about from week 3 is Washington and Michigan State, and the Huskies came in and really throttled the Spartans. We highlighted the tough situation that Michigan State was in without their head coach, but they got absolutely smoked at home by Washington. They were down by 35 at halftime, and they end up losing 41-7. But Michigan State's got a lot of work to do, and we don't talk about the Pac-12 a lot, but the Pac-12 is off to a phenomenal start in their last season. Washington looking as good as any team really that I've seen, and Michael Penix, former IU quarterback, right in the Heisman Trophy conversation. But Michigan State, Joe, where do they go from here? They got another tough one next week.
Yeah, no, Michigan State. I wish I could give them some kind of silver lining. And of course, the low-hanging one would be, well, it can't get any worse. And that's actually true because they gave up 713 yards. I believe that's the most they've given up in their program's 100 plus year history, which is frankly unacceptable. Michigan State football is built on great defenses and tough-nosed uh, rushing attacks, and none of that happened. Noah Kim was 12 of 31, overthrowing guys, miscommunications all over the field. Michael Penix obviously is a phenomenal quarterback, but you can't let anyone pass for that amount of yards. And the worst thing was for MSU's coordinators is they played Washington last year. It seemed like they had the exact same game plan that failed them against Ohio State, Washington, Purdue, all of their significant losses over the past 2 years with the same coordinators. It seems they haven't learned a damn thing, and that's really a shame for the players. They're obviously fighting against more than the team on the other side of the field. So, got to feel for the Spartans and have a huge one this week. And I think even though Bell Tucker just got officially fired today, this is a big program game for Michigan State and critical not only for their bowl eligibility, but I think their season as a whole. Whether they win 4 to 6 games, I really think could be dependent on beating Maryland at home.
Yeah, so we said they might be able to become a top 25 team by the end of the year if they win some games that might hang in the balance. But nightmare. I know they're only 2-1, but a pretty nightmare start by Michigan State here. So let's turn the page to week 4, Joe. We've got a ton of games that we want to talk about. Still under 10 minutes, so we're still good on time. We start Friday night in West Lafayette. We got a Big Ten West battle between Wisconsin and Purdue. Both these teams think that they might have at least a shot at the Big Ten West. What do you see going down in this one?
Well, these are both teams, obviously, each have a loss. Purdue has two, 1-2. I think the biggest thing is that's been emphasized, and you're probably seeing that in the press conferences you're watching following this or before this, is Big Ten season's a brand new start for these teams. Brand new start for two brand new head coaches in the Big Ten. And, Friday Night Lights at Purdue, and Purdue has a chance to redeem themselves. Their Big Ten opener on a weeknight at home last year against Penn State was a rocket environment. And Hudson Card to stop the Wisconsin run immediately, because if they don't, uh, uh, all right, better. All right. Sorry about that delay, folks. Just had a little Wi-Fi difficulties on one of our ends. But getting back to it, Wisconsin, the biggest key for them to take the crowd of the game is doing what Wisconsin football is built on. That's running the ball with Allen and Malusi. They're going to need they're going to need to establish this early. They don't want to get Hudson Card in a rhythm. If Purdue gets him in a rhythm, this could be a game. And for Wisconsin, this is the kind of game they just have to control from the start, run the ball, run the clock, and with the new rule, give Purdue limited time on the field. And if they take the crowd of the game, Wisconsin's favored by 6 as we speak right now. I can't see how the Badgers don't, not necessarily run away, but don't control the game. So I could see Wisconsin winning this game, in the 10 to 14 point range, Sean.
So we turn the page to Saturday, noon kickoff on BTN. It's your Michigan Wolverines hosting Rutgers. First Big Ten game of the year for your guys. First game with Jim Harbaugh back on the sidelines. You're favored by more than 3 touchdowns, but Rutgers has been pretty impressive so far, 3-0. This might not be as easy of a game as you may have thought at the beginning of the year.
No, absolutely not, Sean. And even the year that turned everything around for Michigan, which was 2021, Michigan's closest home game was against Rutgers. It wasn't against Ohio State, who had Olave, Wilson, and Smith and Jigba. It was against Rutgers. And obviously, I'm not going to infer that Rutgers was better as a team that year, but the style of defense Rutgers plays, they shut down Michigan's run, and they really make the quarterback uncomfortable too. Greg Schiano, going back to his time as a DC at Ohio State, is kind of been a thorn in Jim Harbaugh's side offensively. Rutgers obviously hasn't beat Michigan since 2014 before Greg was even back. But they were leading at halftime against Michigan last year. They held Michigan to 2 second half first downs in 2021. So this is a game Michigan, I'm not saying should be worried about, but a game that will test them. JJ McCarthy did not go last week, quite frankly. He threw 3 interceptions, really should have been 4. The last touchdown to Cornelius Johnson was what you call dumb luck. So, big week for JJ. Need to get back in rhythm. The Wolverines, the past 2 years, have struggled with their Big Ten opener against extremely inferior opponents. And, I think they learned their lesson. Hopefully they did. That, they can't just roll the balls out there and they're Michigan and they'll win, because otherwise you'll be in a 7-6 game with Bowling Green State, which is what they were in for a lot of the first half. So, Rutgers' key to the game is going to be getting some kind of passing attack. They threw for under 50 yards last week, even though they won. And the heart of Michigan's defense this year has been stopping the run. So Rutgers is going to have to vary their offensive attacks. A trademark of an Schiano team is to get some special teams points like they did last year when they blocked that punt. But other than that, Sean, Rutgers is going to have to pull out a lot of stops offensively and on special teams to make this a game, or frankly, even to have a chance to win at the end.
So we move to 3:30 on Saturday. This will be on NBC. It's Maryland going to Michigan State. Back-to-back home games for the Spartans. Like we said, they were annihilated by Washington, and they find themselves as more than a touchdown underdogs here. Maryland minus 7.5. This is a danger zone for Michigan State. I think their season can kind of spiral if they don't get this one. And Maryland has been pretty good so far, 3-0, not really tested yet, but Maryland's going to be liking their chances to pick up a road win here.
Absolutely, Sean. The weakness of Michigan State's program the past 4 years has been their secondary and passing defense. I know their new head coach, Harlan Barnett, is a secondary coach by trade, but quite frankly, Maryland has no reason to not test Michigan State's secondary. I'm not going to say dominate, because Talia Tagovailoa has had all kinds of turnover issues. And Maryland as a team the past 2 weeks have fell behind 14-0 early in games. And you can't do that on the road to the Big Ten. I don't care how bad Michigan State may seem to be. The key for Maryland is going to be immediately attack the secondary. If they establish some kind of run game, I have a hard time believing Michigan State's going to stop them. But the biggest struggle Maryland's had under Mike Locksley has been any kind of consistent defense. Noah Kim obviously struggled 12-31 last week, but he did find some kind of a rhythm in the first 2 weeks. So I think the biggest key to this game, Sean, is Michigan State's going to have to do what they always do when they get into shootouts, which is hold the other team to field goals, force a few turnovers, and Michigan State has to run the ball. They did not run the ball well at all last week. Away from it was the few times it was working. So Michigan State just has to establish some kind of rhythm to make this a competitive game. And, I think this could go either way, but my gut tells me Maryland's offensive passing attack is too much, and Talia doesn't turn the ball over as much as Michigan State would hope he would.
Yeah, this seems to me like we're going to find out real quick whether Michigan State's up for the challenge. And like you said last week, the key to them at least competing with Washington was to play them real tight for a quarter to make them believe that they're in the game and see where it can take you. But they were punched in the face early, and the game was over in the second quarter against Washington. They've got to give their fans something to cheer for, get a lead, get an early turnover or something. That would be my key for Michigan State. Got to play a complete game. You got to start off the game well. So we'll see what happens there. A couple hours later, also on NBC, a huge game and a weekend of really a phenomenal slate of games in college football as a whole. But this is in South Bend. Number 6 Ohio State goes to number 9 Notre Dame. OSU slight favorites on the road. Joe, this is a big one and Ohio State's first major test of the year.
Yeah, one last note on Michigan State, Maryland. That'll roll us right into Ohio State, Notre Dame on the same network. Ohio State kicks off 7:30, Michigan State 3:30. Expect there to be a lot more commercials in the 7:30 game. Not taking a shot at either Maryland or Michigan State, but let's face the facts. This is the kind of matchup college football fans live for. Ohio State a slight favorite. They played last year, obviously in Columbus. Both teams were very different. Notre Dame had Tyler Buckner starting, who looked all but let's face, he looked terrible for last week. And Ohio State obviously had C.J. Stroud, two different quarterbacks this year. You got first-year starting quarterback Kyle McCord going up against Sam Hartman. This is a really interesting game, Sean. I think Ohio State being favored by 3.5 is, I think, right. I think Ohio State, talent for talent, wins out against Notre Dame, but Notre Dame does have the better quarterback. I think they also do have the better offensive line, and that's been the recipe for disaster for Ohio State. I don't have to mention the two matchups against Michigan the past 2 years where Michigan established the run game and especially did it late to grind out the game and dominate at the end. So I think the biggest thing Ohio State has to exploit is their talent at the skill positions. No one in college football can cover Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think Notre Dame's secondary has been tested all that much this year. And if anyone knows how to scheme up a secondary, it's Ryan Day. And Marcus Freeman, the former Buckeye, I'm pretty sure he didn't mean any ill will when he made certain comments about Ohio State's academics last year. But you better believe that's bulletin board material for Ohio State. I do think the biggest thing that's going to decide this game is Ohio State's playmaking ability on offense and Notre Dame's non-explosion on offense. So I'm going to go with the Buckeyes here. I think this is going to be a really entertaining game. I think Ohio State's going to find out a lot of problems they have, even if they win. I think Notre Dame's offensive line is going to establish the run game, but I do think ultimately good old OSU comes out and they dominate on offense. And frankly, Sean, I think they might have a lot of this crowd. I'm not saying they'll have more fans, but Ohio State fans travel, and this is their first time in South Bend in over 2 decades. So I think Ohio State fans could make up 35 to 40% of that crowd, and OHIO may take over the stadium should the game get out of hand early. So,
yeah, so there's plenty of top 25 battles. There's another one in the Big Ten. It's number 24, Iowa, going to play Penn State. Same time, which doesn't seem like the best idea from the TV's perspective. Not that this is as big of a game as a top 10 battle, but also at 7:30 on CBS. Penn State favored by 2 touchdowns against Iowa. Both teams 3-0. Penn State obviously coming off that nice road win against Illinois, and Iowa. They also had a nice road win against Iowa State a couple weeks ago. So, what are you looking forward to seeing in this one, and how are Penn State going to take care of business here?
for Drew Aller, I think it's kind of funny. He's kind of progressing up in the kinds of defenses he plays. He played a Power 5 defense in West Virginia week 1, albeit a not so great one. He had his dominating game against Delaware. Then he kind of had a little trouble with Brett Bielema, who's a phenomenal defensive mind, but now he's kind of facing, the real big level boss, which is Phil Parker, who I think, is among the top 5 defensive coordinators in all of college football year in, year out. So I think Iowa's going to give him some different looks. I think they'll disguise coverages, disguise blitzes to throw Aller off. And I will say this, Sean, I'm circling this game because because of who's Iowa's quarterback is. It's not only that Cade went to Michigan. Cade's won in ruckus environments in Happy Valley before, and so is his tight end Eric Gall. And Iowa's a team that's been annoying at Penn State's side before. Penn State, I believe James Franklin does have a winning or at least 500 record against Iowa, but all those games usually go down to the wire. Iowa pulls it out, or Penn State needs a 2017. I think this is the 14 and a half point spread is a little much for me. I think Iowa's defense isn't going to allow them to be blown out unless Cade turns the ball over, which he's not known to do in these kinds of games. And the key for Iowa is going to be taking the crowd out. It's like in any whiteout. They got to take the crowd out of the game. I think the run game is going to struggle against Penn State's defensive line. So getting out of third and obvious passing situations, controlling the game, varying your calls, not running on first down every play like Brian Ferentz likes to do on first down. So I think the biggest key for me is going to be Penn State should win this game, but Iowa has to mess with Drew Aller in some way, make him turn the ball over. And then on offense for Iowa, they absolutely cannot turn the ball over, and they have to fool Penn State's defense and fool Manny Diaz. Otherwise, I think Penn State winning by 14 is more realistic in that scenario.
Yeah, it seems like Iowa's defense is at least going to give them a shot, and they've
Absolutely.
probably got to play about as mistake-free game as you can get because they don't really score a lot of points anyway. So they've got to play almost 4 complete quarters of football, and they still might not be on top. So I could see this. I think Penn State will win, but I can see this game being a lot closer than it seems, or being a 10-point game at the end of the day when it really was 2 possessions the entire game. But one more game we're going to talk about here, Joe. Minnesota at Northwestern. Minnesota are heavy favorites, over 12 points it is now. Big Ten West, again, somebody's got to win the conference. Minnesota already has a conference win. Good opportunity to get a second one here.
Yeah, no, I think this is a game, Minnesota. It's kind of a like a Big Ten basketball situation where you're at the road on a clearly inferior foe. You just need to get out of there with a win. No other way to put it. I do not believe Northwestern has any capability to keep up with Minnesota, but this is a game Minnesota has a good chance to overlook. They play Michigan in 2 weeks, and then they play Louisiana the week before they play Michigan. So they have two, I don't want to say trap games, but games that they're not going to be so excited to play in. So I think PJ Fleck is going to have to use his ultra motivational skills to remind his guys that, upsets happen, even though they're 1-0 in the conference. A loss to Northwestern puts them right back at the middle pack of the Big Ten West, and they lose that advantage after winning that thrilling week 1 game over Nebraska. So that's all I'm looking for, just Minnesota to take care of business. And I think they have enough veterans on the team and enough playmakers that Northwestern, frankly, has none to match Minnesota. So just a business trip for Minnesota is what I'd emphasize.
So that's also at 7:30 Eastern time, and that'll be on the Big Ten Network. Not sure how many people will tune into that one because there are a bunch of other games that are better going on at the time. But if Northwestern has a lead or ends up winning, then it'll be probably one of our bigger talking points next week. So, Joe, we're about at 25 minutes, so we'll end the show as usual with a couple of questions from the fans.
Yes, we'll start with a football one. The rest are basketball for you, Sean. Again, from our boy Noah. Joe, you've repeatedly stated that you believe Penn State will lose one of their week 3 or 4 games. Are you still holding true to that prediction? And which of those 2 primetime games, I'm assuming he's talking about the good ones, no offense to Minnesota Northwestern, do you see ending in a blowout? I'll answer the first one. I think Iowa could definitely do it. Am I going to claim they will? No, but I think this game, I'm going to claim that Iowa covers at least. I think Sean is spot on. Their defense will rarely allow them to get blown out in a game. I think the last time Iowa truly got their butts kicked was Ohio State last year, and then the Big Ten title game against the Michigan team that went to the playoff with Cade McNamara. And with a veteran QB like him who's been in that environment, I think he'll kind of be able to poise the guys and get them under control. As for the second question, I think Ohio State has the absolute capability to blow out anyone in the country, and I mean anyone in the country. Joel Klatt today, and even Josh Payton mentioned how the gap isn't really all that big between teams quite yet. I think that could definitely change in October, but I think the firepower and Ryan Day's play calling definitely gives Ohio State capabilities to blow out Notre Dame. And frankly, I find it more likely Ohio State blows out Notre Dame than Notre Dame actually wins this game. So I'll go on record saying that.
Yeah, I agree.
Sean, this next
I agree
next
too.
one.
I think Ohio State has a sneaky confidence about them this year that they're people have kind of criticized how they're playing so far, and I could really see them rising to the occasion and knocking Notre Dame out here because Notre Dame's been hyped going into every season that I can remember since I was 8, and I could see Ohio State winning pretty convincingly. And like we talked about Iowa, it'll be close almost no matter what. So
Yeah, absolutely. And this one is specifically for you, Sean. The Big East released their full college basketball schedule today. Why does the Big Ten take so long to release their schedule? And does it show its clear affinity to football? Don't even answer the second question. We both know the answer to that. Answer the first one.
I don't know. I mean, I follow a whole bunch of other teams from other conferences, and the social media posts have been rolling in with the conference schedule. And I had to do a little look. I'm like, wait, where's the Big Ten conference schedule? And it's not out yet. I don't know if they're waiting for a time, but the season starts in less than 2 months. So they're cutting it close. I want to know when IU's coming to Rutgers because they will this year. And you Big Ten teams do know their opponents and home and away and who's playing each other twice and stuff like that, but not a schedule yet. And I don't think it really matters. It's just a little bit annoying from a fan's point of view that you can't, if you're a fan of these teams and you don't live near the school anymore, you try and plan out your trips to see them a couple times per year. And for me, that's Rutgers. So it's just a little annoying, and hopefully it's soon. I think it will be soon because we're cutting it a little close here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sean, our final question kind of goes on a similar path. Do you like the relatively new, I guess, 20 game schedule in the Big Ten? And do you like the two in between games in December? So for those who don't know, the two games sandwiched between December. So usually the beginning of December, then you play other non-conference, then you go fully into conference. So Sean, what are your thoughts on that?
I do like the 20 game conference schedule because it provides a real boost to your strength of schedule rankings when it comes time for the tournament, especially if you haven't really scheduled non conference well. In terms of the 2 December games, that's been going on for probably a decade now, at least. Maybe not that long, but more and more conferences are doing that too. The MAC does it, for example. Fairfield, we had 2 conference games in the beginning of December, end of November area. So I think it's sort of it's not ideal for these teams, obviously, because you often have it's a big time for some of the other like big non-conference games too, because the college football regular season is over. So you see some of the big non-conference games in early December, and then you play a couple cupcakes before the Christmas break, and then you're back in the Big Ten. It's not ideal, but I think with the 20 game schedule, you got to push 2 more games somewhere else. So I guess it's okay that way. It is curious to see, Joe, what they will do with the schedule when the Big Ten expands next year and the year after that. Will they still do 20 games? Because if there's 18 teams in the conference, are you really going to play 3 teams twice and the other 17 and the other 14 teams once? I don't know if that really works. I think do you go down to a 17 game schedule with 18 teams and you play everybody once and you rotate the years? They're certainly not going to make Rutgers go out to California just to play one game. They'll probably, the Pac-12 even does that, and they're not nearly as geographically diverse as the Big Ten. You see so I think that's a bigger conversation that I don't think we'll have answers to probably until the last possible moment. But where do you see the Big Ten schedule going as we add a couple more teams in basketball?
I think, this is going to be a conference just trying to derive the most money as possible from all sports, and they're going to get a majority from football. That's why I didn't answer the second part of the prior question, because we all know the Big Ten's has the affinity to football. Frankly, every conference that lasts in the Power Five does, except the Big East, which isn't even a college football conference. But with that said, I think they'll definitely do the 14 teams, and then you might have three protected rivalries similar to what you're going to see in a lot of football conferences. So, you know, throw the ones out there: Michigan, Michigan State, USC, UCLA, Indiana, Purdue, of course. And I think that'll be a good thing that you play those guys twice, but it's gonna stink. Every other year now, fans are gonna have to see their team. It's kind of that way anyway, but that's now guaranteed. So if you're a Wolverine or Hoosier in New Jersey, you might only be able to see your team every 2 years now, as opposed to every year. So that's a downside, but that's the world we live in, and it's not changing. So
And certainly the schedule will change. I would say more so in football. You're not going to see those teams. I mean, maybe ever if they keep the divisions and you don't make the conference championship game. Like, I know there's a couple cross division games, but if there's it could be 5 years before you see another team. So that's a really loaded question. I think there's probably a lot of good ideas that they're going to float around. And I guess we'll see what happens, because we haven't really heard much about it after the big news of the California teams joining, and then the second batch of teams joining from up north in the Pac-12. So I guess we'll see what happens.
yeah, no, sorry to end on such a grim note, guys. But to make this better, definitely tune in to the games this Saturday and even Friday night. I think this is one of the best weeks of football in the Midwest. Don't even worry about the Big Ten, the Midwest in general. Anytime Ohio State, Notre Dame play, the whiteouts on, and this is a Saturday. Maybe your team's not doing well. Maybe you're looking forward towards basketball. Talking about you, Michigan State and Indiana, but try to enjoy some college football before it calendar turns to November.
And so we probably will go back to the 2 episodes per week next week, because this week 4 recap is gonna we're gonna have some good games to talk about, hopefully. But thank you for tuning in to the 7th episode of the In a Nutshell podcast.